left. Gerrard. Everybody's gone forward for England. Away by Cernar. Rakitic. And England are out of the European Championships.
And it is a sad day today to be relieved of my post.
Fabio Capello has emerged as the front-runner for the England job. Described as the Alex Ferguson of Italian football, he admitted his interest from the outset. He's Italian, 61, has won 9 league titles and is out of a job. Oh, and he doesn't speak English.
England are playing their first competitive game since that loss to Croatia under Capello's reign. They have played 5 friendlies under him, with in different form. Theo Walcott is handed his first start, as only 3 players survived from 2007, Joleon Lescott, Frank Lampard and Gareth Barry. The young Arsenal forward proves to be a wise selection, as he sets up 2 chances in 3 minutes, but neither are taken, and he is marked doubly by the Andorra players, and Stuart Downing is ineffective on the other wing. At half-time it's 0-0. The English support large enough in number to move the game from Andorra to Barcelona, as there wasn't a big enough stadium to accommodate them in the entire country, boo them off. Capello takes action. Downing is replaced by Joe Cole, who was a spectator in his start against Croatia. 3 minutes later he scores, latching on to a free kick. 6 more minutes pass and he latches on to Wayne Rooney's through ball to double the scoring. It ended that way. 3 points, but nobody was impressed, with a game away to their conquerors Croatia coming next. The Guardian wrote, similar sloppiness will be horribly costly in Croatia, while the BBC noted that all they did was give possession back to the Andorran defence. The Andorra captain said that they were no better than McLaren's side they played 18 months earlier, while their coach said that if he managed England and Mr Capello managed Andorra, then I'm sure we would beat Andorra more than 2-0. Capello surprised pundits again by picking Walcott ahead of the more experienced face David Beckham, but he capitalised on a mix-up to put England 1-0 up. His pace was frustrating opponents, leading to ill discipline amongst the hosts, which came to a head when Robert Kovac, whose back the ball came off to gift Walcott a goal, elbowed Joe Cole, leaving him bleeding and injured, and Croatia down to 10 men. Walcott was teed up by Wayne Rooney, a man in poor form prior to today, to double his and England's tally, and then Rooney himself scored his first goal in 11 months to make it 3. Croatia did get a consolation, but Walcott completed his hat-trick to win 4-1. The BBC called it a magnificent performance, whilst The Guardian compared it to England's famous 5-1 win in Munich. England were back. The rest of the qualifiers passed by with ease. By the time England was set to face Croatia at Wembley, England had a perfect record, an impressive 26 goals in 7 games, 8 of those coming from Wayne Rooney. Just like in 2007, England only needed a draw to progress. But this time there was no tension, with 2 more games after this to go. The job was done within 20 minutes anyway, with England 2-0 up. It finished 5-1, with Rooney scoring his 9th goal to beat the English record in a World Cup qualifying campaign. Despite a 1-0 loss to Ukraine in the next match, they finished with a 3-0 win in Belarus, scoring the most goals in the European qualifying section, 6 more than recently crowned European champion Spain. England's problems had never been a lack of talent. McLaren's last team had some legendary names: David Beckham, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, Sol Campbell. The problem was getting them to play well together. In Capello, it seemed that the 3 Lions had found a man who had done just that. Man City and England midfielder Gareth Barry is injured in a 1-0 defeat to Tottenham. Injury woes are starting to plague Capello, as Joleon Lescott and Wes Brown are ruled out, and he seems panicked. His side relies on young players, and he is worried that there is not enough steel and experience. He sends out SOS calls to Owen Hargreaves, who had played 1 minute of football in 20 months due to a knee condition, Ledley King, Paul Scholes, Bobby Zamora, Phil Neville and Jamie Carragher. None have been capped in years, and only Carragher and King agree. The former said later in an interview with The Athletic that he only joined because of Capello's record, leading the Milan team of Baresi and Maldini. When asked if the Italian met expectations, not really, if I'm honest. Capello had also got in hot water with the press and the FA. On the 10th of May, he did a deal to launch an app called the Capello Index, which would analyse players and give them a rating based on performances. The FA, understanding the bad PR which would come with the England manager's name next to an app criticising the England team, shut it down. A day later, Capello names his preliminary 30-man squad. This will be whittled down to 23 before South Africa. As stated before, Carragher has talked out of retirement, whilst King, who has not played since before Capello's appointment, is picked. Club manager Alex Ferguson said that Hargreaves' knee couldn't handle a training session, never mind a World Cup, and despite his ankle problem, Gareth Barry is still picked. Adam Johnson and Michael Dawson are the only uncapped players, while Joe Cole is picked for the first time since the first games against Andorra and Croatia. Capello thought that due to South Africa's high altitude, England also needed high-altitude training. Despite disagreement amongst the wider football world, their bizarre schedule was a week in the Austrian mountains, a quick return to London to play a farewell game at Wembley, and another week-long camp in Austria before heading off to South Africa. This unsurprisingly dragged. Capello was later described as a control freak by Stephen Warnock. Other players felt it felt like an army camp, with nothing to do when not training. The wisdom of flying to Austria, back again, and then to Austria once more was criticised by physio Gary Lewin later, and the farewell game against Mexico did not inspire much confidence despite a 3-1 win. Rooney, after a spectacular qualifying, had picked up an injury and rushed back and didn't seem as sharp. The defence showed disorganisation according to the BBC, although they were without Ashley Cole and John Terry as they had appeared in the recent FA Cup final. Ledley King was far from showing he could flourish, said The Guardian, although he would surely only play a backup role behind Terry and Rio Ferdinand. The only relief, they said, is that there are no further club fixtures in which they can be injured. Back to Austria, they played their final official warm-up game against Japan in the city of Graz, 2 days before the official squad was to be revealed. David James made his first starting goal in over a year, showing Capello's uncertainty over his 3 rather inconsistent keepers. James, Robert Green and Joe Hart each had issues. Hart was inexperienced and his distribution was unreliable, while James was nearly 40. Green was hardly world class, but he played well against Mexico, and was much as seeming to be number 1 out of necessity. Japan took a 1-0 lead early on as Marcus Tulio Tanaka lost Glenn Johnson from a corner, and it took 2 late own goals from crosses to get England to win. The BBC called the performance lethargic and unconvincing. The Guardian, however, somewhat sarcastically viewed the performance positively, saying that at least England would be free of complacency. The England squad to go to South Africa was not that surprising in most aspects. The 7 that were cut included the 2 uncapped players, Michael Dawson and Adam Johnson, as well as the unfavoured Leighton Baines, Scott Parker and Tom Huddleston. 2 cuts raised eyebrows, however. Darren Bent, who had come 3rd in the Golden Boot race for the Premier League, was dropped for Emile Heskey and Joe Cole, who were in poor form, whilst Theo Walcott was the final omission. This was the oldest England squad ever, and Walcott would surely have added pace to a side often accused of lethargy. But this squad had a number of talented and experienced players to make up for that. Ashley Cole, Rio Ferdinand, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Wayne Rooney and John Terry are all looked back at as world-class footballers and with good reason, and all were at or near the peak of their careers. 3 days later, they headed to South Africa. Gary Lewin tells Capello that they need to be eased in gently, but with 8 days to go to the first game against the USA, the Italian feels they need to get match ready as soon as possible. But then captain and centre-back Ferdinand was injured in a training collision with Emile Heskey. This wasn't a knock, this was a World Cup ending injury, and Michael Dawson was called to take his place. This meant that England had not only lost their captain, they lost a reliable centre-back partnership as well. So who would partner Terry? The hitherto uncapped Dawson was an option that did not look likely, and it seemed to be between Matthew Upson, Ledley King and Jamie Carragher. All talented, but by that point ageing and past the high point in their careers. Capello insists on playing a 4-4-2, something the BBC later called a character flaw. So Wayne Rooney needed a partner, probably the best with his form. With Darren Bent left behind, it was between the out-of-form Emile Heskey, who Capello liked, and the Spurs duo of Jermaine Defoe and Peter Crouch. None of those could have at that point be described as world-class, and he had issues on the midfield as well, with Gerrard and Lampard not proving to be the best central duo. Capello's other central midfielders weren't up to scratch either, with Gareth Barry still having ankle issues, and James Milner and Michael Carrick disappointing in training. So Capello had issues in goal, defence, midfield, and up front. There was still one more exercise to go, an unofficial friendly away to Platinum Stars, a team that just avoided relegation in South Africa's top tier last season. Although Defoe put them 1-0 up, a Glenn Johnson foul gave them a penalty. Thankfully this was not converted, but it was still another poor performance in the first half. James Milner later recalled to The Athletic, in the half-time interval, Capello started by saying calmly, "Yes, it was a good first half. You did everything I asked you to do." And then he just exploded off the scale yelling, "No you fucking didn't." He smashed his hand down on the table in front of him and absolutely went off. England were a bit better in the second half. Rooney was said to the BBC to have shown both sides of his football personality, setting up a goal and scoring another, but also being shown a yellow card for swearing at the referee. With 5 days to go, England had much to be concerned about. They had a relatively easy group. Could Capello use these competitive games to find a team that worked? The England team was selected, and the questions were answered. It would be Robert Green who would start in goal, and Ledley King would partner Terry. That Gerrard-Lampard partnership would start in the middle, while Heskey played up front, ahead of Rooney. Milner plays on the left, despite an illness.
Chance here for England. Score! The goal from Steven Gerrard is...
England had a dream start, but then problems arose. Milner clearly wasn't up to it due to his illness and was replaced by Sean Wright-Phillips after just half an hour. Ledley King had an abductor problem and would be replaced at half-time by Carragher, but even before the interval, disaster struck.
From Dempsey, tries to get away from Gerrard, fires it in hard alone, a desperate mistake by Robert Green!
Many people blame Green for the fact that England didn't win this game, but in fact, the blunder was just one part of the problem. England had a far better team than the USA, and they should have dispatched them easily. But they didn't.
Ball in here, chance for Emile Heskey to make it 2-1 England. The save is made by Howard. Donovan, Altidore, looking to outrun the Carragher here. It is Altidore, breathtaking stuff. Green saved England this time. The referee has blown for full time and it has ended all square. The final score here in the Royal Bafokeng Stadium was England 1, United States of America 1.
The Guardian noted that, while Green will inevitably carry the can for this disappointment, in truth it was not a great England performance. They were right. Yes, Green's error was shambolic, and a save you'd expect a Sunday League goalie to make was not. But England's attack was equally poor. Although Heskey's pass to set up Gerrard was brilliant, his own shooting was poor, while Rooney was a non-entity. When Peter Crouch replaced Heskey late on, the Guardian's live commentary said, "He's been okay by his usual low standards, but so little is expected of him that you could hammer a Heskey-sized wooden post into the opposition penalty area and it would do just as good a job." Josie Altidore especially gave England trouble all game in defence, and at times they seemed lucky to draw 1-1. The BBC noted that they ran out of ideas. Praise has to be given to the Americans' performance as well, who were exciting in attack, if a bit lacking in defence. But England could have easily won, if they played better. Green later noted that Capello barely communicated with his players, apart from to tell them that you were too fat for what he wanted. He said that after the USA match, he just told me I wasn't playing in the next game, and that was the last time he spoke to me at the tournament. In truth though, a draw was poor but not disastrous. In 2006, eventual winners Italy had drawn 1-1 to the Americans in their group. Lots of other big teams had drawn their first game. France to Uruguay, Italy to Paraguay, and Portugal to the Ivory Coast, while Spain lost their first game to Switzerland. But there were other complaints in the camp. Wayne Rooney had said in a press conference 2 days before the next game against Algeria that the camp was causing boredom. Breakfast, train, lunch, bed, dinner, bed was how he described it. In the 2006 World Cup, the opposite criticism was given. England players spotted spending time with girlfriends who had caught the attention of lusty tabloid reporters, taking attention off of football. But now players were so bored that Jermaine Defoe watched Wayne Rooney's wedding video in its entirety in search of something to do. The hotel had excellent facilities, but it was in the middle of nowhere, with no town nearby to go to. But after all, a few boring afternoons was worth it to play in the competition you dreamed of as a child. In the other games, Slovenia beat Algeria 1-0 and then drew 2-2 with the Americans. This meant England had a bit of ground to make up in the table, but it was still completely in their own hands. 3 changes were made. David James came in for Robert Green after his error, while Jamie Carragher came in for the unfit Ledley King. Finally, Gerrard was forced out wide to replace James Milner, with Gareth Barry now partnering in the middle. But the performance wasn't good enough.
This is the last opportunity for a goal. If ever England needed a hero, it's now. In by Gerrard. Crouch can't get there, and it's all over. The first ever meeting at international level between England and Algeria will frankly not live long in the memory.
Nice to see the whole fans here.
Fact is that Wayne Rooney wasn't up to scratch in this game at all, being barely able to control the ball. And without Rooney, England had nothing. An easy save from a Lampard shot was the most either side threatened. Perhaps the only thing you could say was that England were at least not leaky at the back this time. Gerrard and Lennon on the wings provided nothing. Rooney was unfit, Heskey was invisible, Barry and Lampard was just an uneasy partnership as the last one. The increasingly desperate substitutes, W-Phillips, Defoe and Crouch, added little. The players that were left out were of much more interest. Joe Cole still having no game time in the whole tournament, with Theo Walcott and Darren Bent probably chuckling to themselves at home. England were not even amusingly shambolic like Robert Green was, they were just bad. Given the cost of a trip to South Africa, it's no wonder they were booed by their loyal and large support. Again, Algeria deserved credit, but it wasn't good enough from England. England were under big pressure, but at least it was still in their hands. They could guarantee progression with a win against Slovenia. A draw would not be enough unless they got ridiculously lucky with the result in the other game. But if England could come together and pull a performance out of the bag, maybe their tournament could be reinvigorated. But it wasn't just Rooney getting frustrated. John Terry had echoed Rooney's complaints of boredom, and in a direct challenge to the manager called on Joe Cole to start against Slovenia. Graham Souness criticised him on RTE Sport. It's not his position to say who should be in the team and who shouldn't be in the team. Furthermore, he publicly leaked that they would have a crisis meeting, saying, "If we feel something has to change, we owe it to the country and the manager to say it in that meeting tonight." He also said he was speaking on behalf of the players, which was untrue. But that wasn't the only division. Stephen Warnock pointed out that at the lunch tables, the Chelsea teammates, the Man U players and so on would sit together, and they wouldn't interact as one team. Not conducive to a good atmosphere in the camp. But 2 days later, Terry publicly apologised. Maybe some reconciliation was happening after all. Again, Capello tweaked his team but did not go for massive changes. Matthew Upson replaced the suspended Carragher at the back. Gerrard played on the right this time, in for Aaron Lennon, as James Milner came back on the left. Finally, Jermaine Defoe replaced Heskey.
It's Milner. Defoe tries to get there! Jermaine Defoe scores! England have the breakthrough they desperately need! This now is Nemekovic. That's 3 minutes playing. That's England through. They beat Slovenia. The job has been done.
England had done it, but it was imperfect. Their lack of clinical finishing and a late winner for the Americans in the other game meant that they would come second in the group on goals scored. But at least they were through. They created many chances and the score was only 1-0 because Slovenia's goalkeeper played excellently. The Guardian noted that England gave a display of high-tempo football redolent of a Premier League afternoon in winter. Like many teams in World Cup history, could their slow start just be nerves as they eased into the tournament and showed what they were capable of later on? They had weathered the storm, unlike other troubled teams like Italy and France. There were still problems, chiefly Rooney's fitness. Joe Cole got his first minutes when the Man United striker was limping and had to come off, but at least they wouldn't go home. But the fact they came second meant that rather than Ghana, they would be playing Germany in their next game. Capello picked an unchanged side, meaning Upson started despite King being fit again, and Carrick back from suspension. Comparing the mostly older players in England's side to Germany's young team of future superstars Sami Khedira, Mesut Ozil, Manuel Neuer, Jerome Boateng and Thomas Müller was an interesting juxtaposition.
That's misread by Terry. Here's closer. It's Miroslav Klose! And Germany lead! Here are the youngsters again, passing it around superbly, and this is Klose's pass, and now it's Müller. England all over the place. Podolski, great stuff from Germany, 2-0!
England's problems this time were in defence rather than attack, and it would take a monumental effort to get them back into the game.
Very much in their favour. Here's Gerrard, and the header's in! Really well taken by Matthew Upson. Germany have the lead, but pegged back. Here's Milner. Defoe looking for room. Lampard! Did it go in? No, say the officials. Over the line or not? Yes, most definitely. It's well over.
To put it bluntly, England were robbed here. There's no other words to describe it. The ball was clearly over the line. But the goal didn't count, and Germany made the most of their reprieve.
Lots of space here for Müller! 3-1 for Germany! A brilliant counter-attack from Joachim Löw's side. Race on here between Ozil and Gareth Barry, and Ozil showed great balance and pace. He's got a pass on here for Müller. Must be 4! Is 4! Collective shoulders slumped in red shirts. But for triumphant Germany on a very, very special day for them. A look back on a tremendous display. England have been buried here in Bloemfontein. It's finished Germany 4, England 1.
Both goals were embarrassing to concede, especially the final goal. Barry had plenty of ground on Ozil but was somehow beaten to the ball. But with Germany, a young team, having throwing away a 2-0 lead to draw 2-2, the game would have been so much different. England would not have pushed so many men forwards and left themselves so vulnerable on the break. Both of Germany's goals in the second half came immediately after the more attacking Joe Cole was brought on for James Milner. Yes, England were misfortunate, but that doesn't mask their defensive calamity. The decision to play Upson ahead of Carragher or King is particularly puzzling looking back. As the BBC wrote, England will complain long and hard about the bitter injustice of Frank Lampard's disallowed goal, with justification, but no amount of controversy should disguise how embarrassing they have been in parts of this game. And the puzzles to England's failure in South Africa were a mix of three things: bad luck, bad decisions and bad performances, all of them intertwined. Losing Ferdinand was unlucky but could have been avoided if more intelligence was used in their preparation. Choosing Upson ahead of King and Carragher in the Germany game was also a poor choice. The toxic atmosphere inside the camp and outside it was made worse by Terry trying to make himself some sort of rebel leader, while sticking to 4-4-2 so rigidly, with only minor tweaks being made, after obviously poor performances, was also questionable. To Capello's credit, he made a team that looked completely hopeless in 2007 look good again for 2 years. but he wasn't able to do it at a big tournament. He kept his job for the Euro 2012 qualifiers, but after resigning during a dispute regarding John Terry's captaincy, we never got to see how he would have done things differently at a major tournament with England.